My name is Hannah Cole. I am 29 years old, and on the most important day of my life, my wedding day, not a single member of my family showed up. Not my parents. Not even my stepbrother. The church pews they promised to fill remained empty, their absence louder than any words they could have spoken. If you're watching this, drop a comment, hit like and subscribe, because what I'm about to share isn't just about a wedding. It's about betrayal, abandonment, and the kind of silence that can break you. The ceremony had been beautiful on the surface. Candles glowing along the aisle, soft music from a string quartet, the scent of roses drifting through the air. I stood in my white dress, my hands trembling as I held Ethan's, the man who had loved me with a steadiness I never knew existed. When I turned, hoping to catch the proud smiles of my family, there was nothing. Just rows of strangers. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I thought back to when I was 12, standing at my stepbrother Caleb's graduation. I'd cheered until my throat was raw, holding a homemade sign above my head. My parents had beamed at him, pride etched into their faces. Not once had they noticed me beside them, desperate for the same love. And now, years later, when it was my turn to walk down the aisle, they chose not to come at all. Ethan whispered to me at the altar, "Focus on us. They don't matter today." I nodded, but inside I was breaking. Because no matter how much I wanted to believe him, their absence sat like a stone on my chest. At the reception, the guests toasted, laughed, and danced, but there was a hollow chair at the head table where my father should have sat. An untouched glass of champagne where my mother's smile should have been. Caleb, the stepbrother who once promised we were family no matter what? He never even sent a text. My closest friends tried to distract me, pulling me into dances, pressing glasses of wine into my hand, but every smile felt fragile. The betrayal was too heavy to shake. I kept glancing at the door, half hoping, half hating myself for still expecting them to walk through it. But the longer the night went on, the clearer it became. They weren't late. They had chosen not to come. And that choice cut deeper than any words ever could. The morning after the wedding, I sat at the kitchen table still in disbelief. My white bouquet lay wilted on the counter, petals falling one by one like pieces of me. Ethan brewed coffee, watching me carefully, but he didn't know how to mend a wound that deep. I kept asking myself the same question. Why? Why would my parents refuse to stand by me on the day that mattered most? Why would Caleb, who once swore we were inseparable, leave me without even a word? Memories pressed in like uninvited guests. I was 16, sitting in the bleachers at Caleb's football game. My parents screamed his name from the sidelines, faces flushed with pride. I clapped too, but not once did anyone notice me. After the game, Caleb was lifted onto their shoulders and I stood on the edge, invisible, clutching my backpack. That was my family, loud in celebration when it suited them, silent when it came to me. At the wedding reception, I tried to hide my breaking heart. I smiled for the photos, I cut the cake, I twirled under the string lights. But inside I was shattered glass. Every laugh from a guest reminded me of the people who weren't there. When Ethan's parents hugged me tightly, whispering how proud they were, I almost collapsed in their arms. They had been strangers once, yet they showed me more love in a single evening than my own family had in decades. By afternoon, a text finally came through. My phone buzzed, and for a second my heart leapt. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe an excuse that, while weak, would still mean they cared. It was from my father. 3 words: "Hope it went well." No explanation. No regret. Just a hollow message that felt like salt in an open wound. I stared at it, trembling. Ethan saw the screen and shook his head in disgust. "Hannah, you don't need them. Look around you. You have people who chose to be here. They don't deserve you." He was right, but the child inside me still longed for the approval I'd never get. Still longed for a family who could have shown up for me just once. I deleted the message without replying. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. Because if they couldn't be there when I said I do, then they had no place in the life I was building now. But what I didn't know then was that their betrayal at the wedding was just the beginning. Something far worse was waiting around the corner. 2 weeks after the wedding, the first crack in their silence came, not through an apology but through gossip. I was in the grocery store when Mrs. Ellison, an old neighbor from my childhood street, stopped me by the produce section. Her eyes were wide with the thrill of fresh drama. "Hannah, I heard your parents skipped the wedding. Said they didn't approve. Is that true?" Her words stung sharper than any knife. Not approve of Ethan, of me. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside my stomach twisted. They hadn't just been absent, they'd made sure the whole town knew why. I drove home shaking, the hum of the engine blurring into the echo of old memories. I saw myself at 14, overhearing my stepmother tell a friend over the phone, "Hannah's too emotional. She'll never make anything of herself." I had sat on the stairs, biting my lip until it bled, swallowing every word like poison. And now, years later, it seemed nothing had changed. When I told Ethan what Mrs. Ellison said, his jaw tightened. "They're not just hurting you anymore. They're trying to ruin us." He was right. The betrayal cut deeper than absence. It was an attack on my character, my choices, my marriage. That night, I sat in Margaret's old rocking chair on our porch, the one she had given me before she died. My stepbrother Caleb's face kept flashing in my mind. He was supposed to be the loyal one, the one who once swore he'd always protect me after our parents' endless fights. I remembered him sneaking me cookies after dinner when I cried, telling me, "Don't worry, Hannah. I've got you." Where was that Caleb now? Ethan squeezed my hand, his voice steady. "Maybe it's time you stopped waiting for them. They're showing you who they are. Believe them." His words hurt, but they sank deep. Maybe I had been holding on to a ghost of a family that never really existed. Still, late that night as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I heard the ping of a message on my phone. My heart jumped. It was from Caleb. "We need to talk. I'm sorry I didn't come to the wedding. There are things you don't know." My breath caught. My parents' absence was betrayal enough. But Caleb reaching out after weeks of silence meant one thing. This story wasn't over. And whatever secret he carried, it had the power to change everything. I stared at Caleb's message until the words blurred. "We need to talk. I'm sorry I didn't come to the wedding. There are things you don't know." My chest tightened. After weeks of silence, after years of being the stepbrother who swore he had my back, this was all he had to say? Still, against my better judgment, I typed back, "Then tell me." Minutes crawled by before his reply came. "Not over text. Meet me. Tomorrow 7 p.m. Same diner we used to go to after school." Sleep didn't come that night. I tossed and turned, every memory of Caleb tangled with betrayal. I remembered the afternoons we'd sit in that diner booth, fries between us, him teasing me about the way I drowned mine in ketchup. I remembered the way he'd once shielded me when Dad's temper flared, stepping in with quiet bravery. That boy was gone. And I wasn't sure who had replaced him. The next evening I sat in the diner's corner booth, the neon lights flickering above, the smell of fried food clinging to the air. When Caleb walked in, my breath caught. He looked older, sharper. His hair slicked back, his suit too polished for a casual meetup. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. I didn't smile. "Why weren't you at my wedding?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because Mom and Dad made it clear. If I showed up, I'd be cut off. No inheritance, no trust fund, nothing." My hands went cold. "So you chose money over me?" His eyes flickered with guilt. "Hannah, it's not that simple. They told everyone you married beneath yourself. That Ethan isn't good enough. They said you're throwing away everything." My throat tightened. Everything? Or just the wealth they care about? Caleb didn't answer. His silence was enough. I leaned back, shaking my head. "You used to be better than this. You used to care." His jaw clenched. "I still do. That's why I reached out. You need to know. Dad is planning something. He wants to make sure you never see a dime of what's left in the family accounts. He's spreading lies, Hannah. About Ethan. About you." The diner noise faded around me. My father wasn't satisfied with absence. He wanted destruction. Caleb? For all his flaws, he was handing me a warning. But was it to help me, or to ease his own guilt? The words tumbled in my head long after Caleb left the diner. "Dad is planning something. He wants to make sure you never see a dime." I sat in the parking lot gripping the steering wheel, my reflection in the rearview mirror pale and hollow. How far were they willing to go? Wasn't skipping my wedding humiliation enough? Now they wanted to sabotage my future, my marriage, my peace? That night, Ethan found me pacing in the living room. The shadows of the house stretched long, the silence broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. I told him everything Caleb had said. Ethan's face darkened. So it's not just about ignoring you. They want to erase you. Erase me. The words echoed like poison. I thought back to when I was 8, sitting on the floor of my bedroom, clutching a school drawing I'd made, a messy family portrait. Mom, Dad, Caleb, and me. When I showed it to them, Dad chuckled, saying, "You made your head too big, Hannah. Don't be dramatic." They pinned Caleb's artwork on the fridge. Mine went straight into the trash. The betrayal wasn't new. It had been sewn into me since childhood, thread by thread. And now it was unraveling all over again. Ethan gripped my hands. "Listen to me. They don't get to define us. Not anymore. They'll try to drag us down, but we'll fight this together." His strength steadied me, but my heart still cracked. Family was supposed to protect you, to lift you, to show up when it mattered most. Mine had done the opposite at every turn. I replayed Caleb's face in my mind, the guilt, the unease. Maybe his warning was sincere. Or maybe it was just another way to soften his betrayal. Either way, it meant one thing. My father's war against me had only just begun. I walked into the bedroom and pulled open the drawer where I kept a box of old letters. Among them was one from my grandmother, written years ago before she passed. Her words rose from the page now like they had been waiting for me. "Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. Choose carefully who you let into your heart." I closed my eyes, the truth solidifying. My parents and Caleb had already made their choice. Now it was time I made mine. But deep down a chill spread through me. Because I had a feeling my father wasn't finished. And his next move could destroy everything I loved. Days passed, but the tension only grew heavier. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened, expecting another dagger hidden in words. The silence from my parents wasn't peace. It was the calm before a storm. And then it came. A letter arrived in the mail, thick and official-looking, stamped with the seal of a law office. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a notice. My father was contesting Ethan's finances, claiming my husband had manipulated me into the marriage for money. It felt like the air had been ripped from my lungs. Ethan found me frozen in the kitchen, the letter shaking in my hand. He read it, jaw tightening until his knuckles turned white. "This is disgusting. They're trying to paint me as some kind of leech." Tears burned my eyes. "They're not just attacking you. They're attacking us. Our marriage. Our love." I flashed back to being 21, bringing my college acceptance letter home. I'd been so excited, so sure they'd finally be proud. Dad barely glanced at it before muttering, "Don't waste our money on some degree you'll never use." Mom had just sipped her wine. Caleb shrugged, already scrolling through his phone. I'd stood there, paper in hand, while my triumph turned into ash. Now, years later, they were doing it again, twisting every joy in my life into something ugly. "We'll fight this," Ethan said, his voice steady even as his anger pulsed. "We'll hire a lawyer of our own. They don't get to control us." But I couldn't shake the sting. My own father was willing to drag me through legal hell, to smear my husband's name just to prove his power. It wasn't about inheritance or wealth anymore. It was about destroying my happiness because he hadn't built it himself. That night I sat on the porch, staring at the stars hidden behind the city's haze. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Caleb. "I told you he wouldn't stop. You need to prepare yourself. He's angrier than I've ever seen him." I didn't reply. My heart was torn between fury and grief. Caleb's warnings weren't enough to erase his absence at my wedding. He still chose silence when I needed him most. And yet, if he was right, if Dad really wouldn't stop, then this battle was only escalating. The papers in my hand weren't just threats. They were a declaration of war. The lawsuit papers sat on the coffee table like a ticking bomb. Every time I walked past them, my chest clenched tighter. Ethan tried to stay calm, burying himself in phone calls with lawyers, but I could see the fury in the way he gripped his pen until it nearly snapped. For me, the pain wasn't just legal, it was personal. This wasn't about money. This was about my father proving once again that I was disposable. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, I got another call, this time from my mother. My stomach dropped before I even answered. Her voice came through the line, soft and trembling. "Hannah, can't we end this? You don't have to fight. Just walk away. Let your father handle things." The gall of it nearly stole my breath. Walk away. From my marriage. From my life. Do you even hear yourself? Her silence was deafening. I imagined her sitting in their big house, pearls around her neck, sipping wine while pretending to be powerless. I snapped. You didn't come to my wedding. You didn't even send a card. Now you're asking me to give up the only happiness I've ever chosen for myself. Her voice broke. You don't understand how hard it is to live with him when he's angry. I froze. For a second, it was like being 12 again, hiding under the covers while their shouting rattled the walls. Caleb standing in the hallway trying to shield me. Mom crying, begging Dad to calm down. The fear, the helplessness, it all came back. But now, I wasn't that little girl anymore. I steadied my voice. Then that's your choice, Mom. To live in his shadow. I won't. And I hung up. My hands shook, but my heart beat stronger than it had in years. When I turned, Ethan was standing in the doorway watching me. He wrapped me in his arms, whispering against my hair, "You're stronger than all of them, Hannah. That's why they hate you. Because you survived without them." Tears spilled down my cheeks, but this time they weren't from weakness. They were from release. I realized then that my father's war wasn't truly against Ethan. It was against me. Against the fact that I had built a life without his approval, without his control. And he would never forgive me for that. But neither would I forgive him. The next time he came for me, I'd be ready. The day of the court hearing arrived, gray and heavy with clouds. Ethan held my hand as we walked up the courthouse steps, reporters buzzing nearby like flies sensing blood. My father was already there, sharp suit pressed, his smirk plastered across his face. My mother stood beside him, her eyes downcast, pearls gleaming against her throat. Caleb hovered behind them, expression unreadable. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. When the judge asked both sides to present, my father's lawyer painted Ethan as a manipulator, a man who had preyed on my emotional vulnerability for financial gain. Each word felt like acid dripping on my skin. But then our lawyer stood, calm and deliberate, laying out every piece of evidence. The life Ethan and I had built together long before Margaret left me anything, the stability we carved from nothing, the truth of who we were. And when it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly, the sound of my heartbeat louder than the creak of the chair. "I am not here because of greed," I told the court, my voice steady. "I am here because my own father refused to walk me down the aisle, then chose to drag my husband's name through the mud. This isn't about money. This is about control. My father abandoned me years ago, and now he wants to erase the family I've built without him. But I won't let him." The silence in the courtroom was thick. My father's smirk cracked for the first time, his jaw tight. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, but I didn't look at her. Caleb met my gaze briefly, guilt flickering, but he said nothing. The judge ruled in our favor. The case was dismissed as baseless. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt taller, steadier, as though the chains of their betrayal had finally snapped. Ethan squeezed my hand, whispering, "It's over." But I knew it was more than just a legal win. It was the end of me waiting for them to love me, to choose me. That little girl on the porch, the one begging for scraps of attention, was gone. I had chosen myself. The clouds outside began to break, streaks of sunlight spilling across the courthouse steps. I paused, took a deep breath, and let the warmth wash over me. For the first time I felt free. When the gavel came down and the judge dismissed my father's case, I thought I would feel only relief. But walking out of that courtroom hand in hand with Ethan, what I felt was something deeper, something heavier. It was closure. For years, I had carried the weight of their rejection like an invisible stone pressing against my chest. Every birthday they missed, every school play where no one clapped for me, every holiday dinner where I sat alone in my room listening to their laughter in the other room, it had all built to this moment. And now, for the first time, I realized I didn't need them anymore. Ethan turned to me on the courthouse steps, his eyes steady. "You did it," he whispered. "You stood up to them. And you won." I smiled, but it was bittersweet. Because winning against them didn't erase the scars they left behind. It didn't erase the empty chairs at my wedding, or the silence that haunted me when I wished for family and found none. But it did remind me that scars don't make you weaker. They make you stronger. I thought of my mother, clutching her pearls, unable to meet my eyes. I thought of Caleb, guilt flickering across his face like a shadow too quick to hold. And I thought of my father, the man who once told me I was too dramatic, the man who skipped his own daughter's wedding but showed up in court to try to steal her joy. They had all chosen their side. and I had finally chosen mine. That evening back home I lit the fireplace and sat with Ethan on the couch, the soft glow washing over us. The papers from court sat on the coffee table, but I didn't look at them. Instead I reached for Ethan's hand, grounding myself in the life we had built together. A life born not from wealth or legacy but from love and resilience. I remembered something my grandmother once wrote in a letter to me. Family is not who shares your blood, but who shares your heart. Back then I didn't fully understand what she meant. Now I did. Because family had been sitting beside me all along. Family had shown up on my wedding day not in the form of parents or stepbrothers, but in the friends who danced with me, in Ethan's parents who toasted to our happiness, in every person who celebrated me for who I was, not for what they could take from me. My blood family abandoned me. But the family I chose? They stayed. Weeks later Caleb sent me another message. A longer one this time. Apologies, excuses, tangled words about fear and pressure. I read it once then deleted it. Because forgiveness isn't something you hand out like candy. It's something that must be earned. And Caleb hadn't earned it. As for my parents, I knew they would continue in their world of control and appearances. But that world no longer touched me. I wasn't their pawn. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their forgotten daughter. I was Hannah Cole. A wife. A survivor. A woman who stood alone at the altar of betrayal and walked away unbroken. So if you ask me now if I regret that empty row at my wedding, the answer is no. Their absence told me everything I needed to know. It was the loudest truth I'd ever been given. That sometimes the people you're born to will never be your family. And that's okay. Because I've built my own. Have you ever faced betrayal? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Betrayal ended them. Love saved me.